Hi, I'm Marie Elizabeth Molly, and this is Relationship Alchemy. Today, we're talking to Stephen Steers about how to build deep relationships with your story. They don't teach you sales in school. They don't teach you how to be confident. They don't teach you how to be out in the world and how to make a way for yourself. But that's what Stephen's here for. He has consulted, advised, and led workshops for more than 500 companies from 25 countries. Isn't that amazing? He's learned that effective sales is about listening and connecting through stories. The better you talk, the more money you make. And he's here to show you how. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Maria Elizabeth. Great to be here. Great to hang out with you again.
Yeah, it's so good to see you again. And one of the fun things we learned about each other when we first met was that we both live in Mexico right now.
Mexico, Mexico. Yes, I love this place.
Mexico, Mexico. Yes. I wish we lived closer. It'd be so fun to actually meet in person.
Well, maybe I'll just have to come out there and check out the whales.
Yeah, come out to Cabo. There you go. There you go. I might come for the whale sharks to your neck of the woods.
Let's do it.
So I'd love to start with this idea of story being a way that we build deep relationships. Please start to unpack that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So we could take it back to anybody's childhood. How did they teach you a lesson? They read you a storybook, right? How did you learn how to share? Probably through a story. They told you like the golden rule and they explained a story to you. If you're religious, they read the Bible to you. They tell you parables and things that you can remember, lessons and legacies and different things, because the story is what stays in your mind. And I was doing a lot of research on this over the years before I started actually saying like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And I read that 67% of information is retained when told through story. So you become memorable when you hear stories. And then I started to look at the effectiveness of stories and what that looks like as well. And some people listening might say, oh, I'm not great at telling stories. I don't have good stories. And don't worry, we'll share some of the stories you already have that are really good and you can use all the time. But the whole purpose of a story is to get your audience, whether that's someone in a relationship, a business context, or even the barista at the coffee shop. The whole point of a story is to get your audience to better be able to tell their own story. And so when you're talking about building deep rapport with people, it's saying, hey, here's what I've experienced. Here's what I've seen. We're of the same cloth. That's what story can do in a way that no statistic can, that way that few things can. It's like, hey, we are bonded through an experience or something. And it's also a way to show vulnerability. And most importantly, in a business or relationship context, it helps show agency. Right? It helps show that you know yourself enough to know what your story is. You know enough about your customer to be able to help them through a challenge or whatever it is. It just demonstrates that you're human and brings everything back to a human context. And it's like, oh, I'm dealing with a real person. So I find story to be amazing. And one other thing too, right? Whether we're saying in a relationship or a business context, because they're kind of similar in a way, right? You're putting yourself out there and you want people to buy you or buy your product. When you tell a story, you're now able to equip someone else who doesn't know you as well to tell a story about you in rooms you're not in yet. So you're building a referral.
I love that.
So, right, I would say Maria Elizabeth, she's an incredible photographer. She swam with sharks and with whales, and she's an incredible person. She's so interesting. You should talk to her. Right? I can tell something about you that gets someone to be like, oh, that's really cool. What else is she into? Different than,
which is so much more interesting than my bio.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
You know, yeah.
And that's what gets me excited about it. And so when I say, like in the bio, they don't teach you sales in school. They don't teach you how to be out there for yourself. Everything we're taught about life, about relationships, about most things is built in a context of having people conform to what everyone else thinks you should be versus saying, hey, who are you? And what does this mean to you in your context? And I think story as one way is just a nice way to get us back to who we are, why we're here, and how we can share that with people in whatever context we're looking for.
That's gorgeous. And I want to come back to something you said that really sparked my listening, which was you said something, even the barista, that it's a way, your story is a way to help others tell their story. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Please say more about that, because
the thing I specifically said was the whole purpose of a story is to help your audience better tell their own. And I love
that.
It's me too. There's a quote by one of those Greek philosophers, the type of guy who only has one name, right? And this guy is like Prince, but back in like 800
Yeah.
BC or whatever. But this guy's name is Horace, and he says something I love, and he says, "You need change only the name, and the story's about you." Right. So let's say I'll use a business context and I'll use a life context afterwards. But let's say you're on the phone with a client and they came to you with an extreme challenge, like they're depressed, they're losing money, they're not sure where they're aligned or whatever it looks like. And you can share a story about someone who you've worked with who's experienced a similar story and the results that they also got from working with you, right? We're helping them not feel alone. We're helping them understand we've seen this before, and we're helping them understand there's a way out of it, right? And now with the great results that the other person got, you change the name, they too can potentially experience great results. An incredible way to just—
gives them hope.
Hope. Exactly. Hope, excitement. I'm not alone, everything like that. And it's all just—
Well, and it normalizes. There's a way that hearing another story who's gone through a similar struggle can normalize. We tend to get so in our own heads about like our own situations and our own issues and all of that. And we think something's wrong with us and I'm so alone. And you hear someone else's story that's overcome something that you're still in the middle of. And that can really help to normalize it, as well as give hope that there is another side.
There's a way out. Exactly. There's a way forward. Yeah. And then in a relationship context, it's, I have a dream about meeting this type of person, living this type of life. Here's why I got to this conclusion. And here's what I would love to do in a perfect relationship. And someone would be like, oh, that's for me. Or, you know what? That's not a good fit.
Right? It's such a great way to not only be clear about what you're wanting because you're describing it in a story form, but it's also, as I think about it and as you're speaking, everything feels like it's boiling down to this question of allowing people to feel you, to feel the real you. And when you're telling a story, as opposed to just kind of like, here's my list of qualifications that I need in a partner, like, it's just, they can actually feel you. And it's both that's a story I want to be a participant in, but it's also like, oh, this person feels good and we resonate. Would you say that's true on both those levels?
Absolutely. And I hate to use this word because it is so overused now, but authenticity.
Yeah.
Right. It's so overused, which bothers me, but it's the word that comes to mind here. When you are you resonate at the frequency you're supposed to, and the right people will always come towards you. And I think with that lens and that context and applying it in that way, you always make it easier for the right people to find you or to repel the people who aren't for you. And that's good. Either way, it works out. And the sooner the better, typically, because that allows you to not waste time, energy, or other things on things that aren't going to serve you really well. But I say, when we walk it back, building deep rapport, it's two sides. It's being a person who's capable of providing depth for another person, right? Which we often forget, right? It's all about pushing hey, here's me, I'm open. But are you also a person who someone else can share in the conspiracy with, be like, yeah, I went through something crazy like that too, right?
Yeah.
Those are some of the uses, and that's some of the fun.
Well, absolutely. And if you keep your orientation toward the thing you're talking about, which is, oh, I'm telling this story so that I can make room for another to tell their story, then you get out of that whole like, look at me thing that can sometimes happen when you're trying to make a sale, or you're trying to impress people from the stage or whatever it is, or you're trying to impress somebody on a date, right? It's like, if you're stuck in that thing of trying to impress, then that room for the other person to come in gets lost.
It does. And there's a book. Have you read Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss?
I have not. Tell me about it.
Incredible book. It's about negotiation. And it's written by a former FBI hostage negotiator. And he explains all these laws of negotiation and deep building rapport with like crazy, ridiculous people who are doing bad things, and then getting them over the line to save lives. Or it's crazy, crazy book. But he explains every tenet of his method through one of the stories where he was dealing with in his career, with terrorists, with bank robbers, you name it. Fascinating. But one of the quotes that I love from that book is he says, don't know what you want so badly that you wouldn't accept something better.
Wow.
And I love that from a relationship standpoint, where lots of us, like everybody, some more than others for sure, but goes in with a list of things they want, certain height, certain income, certain breeding or pedigree or whatever. And all that's moderately important. But just because a person checks the boxes doesn't mean they check the box. And
Amen.
We can be square peg, round hole, or vice versa with a lot of things just because, oh, it looks really good on paper, but you're forcing it. And I think it's important to know what you want, but it's important to know why you want what you want and to be able to open a space, because just because a person checks your boxes, are you checking their boxes too? It's not a one-sided thing. And I think those are some of the things we should all think about as well. And I love quotes, so I got plenty of them, but another one here as well.
I love it.
Is we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. So just remembering it's about all of us. It's not just about one of us. And in sales, in relationships, or otherwise, the more you can include somebody else in the interaction that you're having with them, the happier everyone will be.
Agreed. I have a question. How do you know which story to tell in any given moment? Because I can imagine, and I've also experienced this, that sometimes there might be a story that arises in a certain moment that you want to tell, but maybe you're not through the experience enough, and then it doesn't actually, it ends up becoming more of a cry for attention than an actual useful story, right? As one of my coaches says, my speaker coach, Trisha Burke, always says, speak from the scar, not the wound. And so I'm getting on the quote train today too. I'm joining you on the quote train. But so I'm wondering, when you work with someone or when you teach people about how to use their stories in an effective way to create deep rapport, whether it's from the stage or within their relationships, how do you work with this question of which stories are the ones to tell?
Yeah, great question. So in my method, I teach that there are 3 kinds of stories you already have. They're part of your life. And even if we grew up on the same street, we went to the same high school, same college, work in the same profession, they're going to be completely different because we're different people. And they're the following. The first is your mission. So think about this in terms of, if it's your business, why did you choose to solve this particular problem? You could have probably gotten a job making way more money and having less stress. So why did you choose to do this? What was the moment you knew that this was the thing that you had to do? That's an interesting story. That shows me who you are. You could also think about it from life. Do you have a particular trait? Maybe you're really stubborn and you just don't give up on people. Where did that come from? Tell me that moment. Or did you have a certain thing you did as a kid and everybody gave you your nickname? Where did that come from? Like, how did we get you to where you are? What was that incisive moment? Fascinating, interesting, super personal, and best, no one can copy it, right? Yes. Especially in business. They can't take that. It's yours. There's no competition for that. And also in a dating or relationship context, it's like, hey, this is really me. Here's how it looks, right? So that's mission. The next is vision. So in a business, a good vision ties people together, so far as, oh, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. Okay, well, is what you're thinking about doing helping this vision happen? It's always a filter to run things towards. In a relationship context, here's our thesis for our relationship. We want to be these types of people that achieve these types of things and leave this type of situation for our children or whatever it is. Is that clear? Is that well stated? Does it match? Is it something you can revisit? Do you want to update it? If you don't have that, that can lead to problems, as a lot of us have seen in our lives and in relationships. And then the third kind is milestones. These are where you get, I think, the most mileage out of whatever you're doing, part of the pun there. But milestones are tales of adversity, things you've been through that are tough, and the scars that have happened to us all. These show agency, right? So if we want to talk about, like, some of us have been in relationships with people who've experienced trauma or are going through trauma or whatever. But the fact that they've worked on it, that they've gone through it, they've gone through therapy, they're working on themselves, and they've taken something that's really difficult, but they've turned it into something new, shows agency, shows accountability, and shows that you can trust a person. And these are the subtle bits that storytelling can help with because it shows that you've thought through it, right? More statistics here too, but you won't remember the statistics. But 95% of decisions are made subconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
The other 5% is logic. So whatever you think, like this person checks all the boxes, that's just that 5%. The other 95% is the animal brain. And so anything you can do to help with that subconscious decision-making and building trust is important. And knowing who you are, knowing your mission, knowing your vision, and knowing your milestones are important. Now, answering your direct question, which story do I tell? This requires reading the room. This requires reading the room. If you've been through something super traumatic, you have to kind of understand what context you're going to deploy that story in. So when I work with folks, I typically have them make a list of these types of stories. Which ones do you have? And then we'll talk through and we'll say, hey, this one actually demonstrates a lot about agency, which is really good for the context you're going to use it in. Here's one that you could use casually, how you want. And this will also potentially dovetail into being able to link to this story later so that you're able to build that depth of rapport as you go along in conversation. So the answer is it depends, to be flat. But I think if you're reading the room, if you are willing to become a person who can also receive the depth that you want to achieve, go for it. But also make sure that you're at a place where it's okay to go deep with somebody, because sometimes we can go a little too deep too fast and then we turn people away from us.
And then that feels yucky. Yeah.
Yucky. Not good.
Yeah, I love that. Read the room. Have what I'm hearing you say, tell me if I'm getting this right, is know your stories. Like have your arsenal is a little too warlike a word, but like have your toolbox, have your quiver filled with the arrows of your stories. And then read the room and choose the calibrated. I love the word calibration because it's not about shrinking ourselves or limiting ourselves or not being as who we are, like as big as we are, but it is about calibration. And like you said, if you lob a really deep story into a room that's not prepared or that's not really resonant with sharing at that depth, it's going to fall like hard on the floor and not have the effect you wanted, right? So there's knowing your story and then there's calibrating
yourself
to use when, right?
Absolutely. And then adding to that as well, if you're out here talking to people, telling stories and moving things, remember, it's about helping the audience tell their own story better. It's not about you.
Yes.
It's not about you. It's never been
Say
about
that again.
You.
Say that again for the people in the back.
Let's tell them. No, the whole point of your story is to help someone else tell their own story better. You are a vessel. Your experiences are the invitation to becoming a person who they can trust. That's what it's all about. So if you're getting into too much detail, here's what happened here. Like we don't have to do all that in the right context. It can work, but you can kind of lead with the Cliff Notes version of saying, hey, here's something I went through. It was really crazy when I was young. It affected me in these ways. And what I learned from that was this. And after I learned that, I started to get on a different path and I adjusted my direction and my vision changed. And because of that, I've realized that I want to be with this type of person, or I want to build this type of business. And these are the values that I put out into the world. And I'd love to work with or be with people who share these similar types of values. And then if somebody wants to dive deeper, ask more questions, you've created that space for that, but you haven't overwhelmed them. So I think that's the place where most people can start from and not feel like they're overburdening someone, but just always remember, it's about them. It's not about you.
Amen. My mind is going about, I know, right? I wanted to do the little poet snap. So I have a couple things that came up as you were speaking, is this question about how much detail to include, because if there isn't enough detail in the story, then people can't feel you. It feels like a gloss, right? But if there's too much detail, it's like, oh my God, I don't give a fuck that that it was 3 p.m. in the afternoon on a Thursday. Like, I don't need to know that part. Get to the story, right? So how do you help people know which details to include and which to leave out?
Okay, this is another it depends question. So another quote, I believe it's Mark Twain, who said, if I had more time, I'd have written you a shorter letter.
Exactly. I love that quote.
So brevity is your friend in almost any respect you could find, right? We have to, there's 5 elements of story. I may miss one right now. I'm going to remember here, but it's plot, it's characters, it's conflict, setting, and I'm missing the first, the fourth, the fifth one, pardon me. But if you include all of these elements, you're driving people towards an emotion. That's what you're driving people towards. So too much detail causes many emotions or confusion about what I'm supposed to be feeling or where we're going with this. And we're not able to go in the right direction, right? So as far as how many details, what's the point? What's the lesson? What's the overarching theme is the last one. Theme is the lesson. So what's the theme of the story? So if we're saying it's 8 p.m. and I'm going to the cafe, like, okay, is 8 p.m. a relevant detail for what the lesson is? And if it is, like 8 p.m. at 8:02, I was in a crazy car accident. Like, oh, life can change in an instant. Well, that's the lesson. Okay, cool. Right. But again, I think it comes to reading the room. It comes to brevity is your friend. And it comes to labeling kind of what emotion you're putting out there in the world to share and to receive. And the shorter, the better. But again, it depends on the person, depends on the context, and depends on the overarching goal of what type of rapport you want to build. Again, different with the barista than it is with a potential partner, than it is with a business contact or a customer. It's slightly different, but those 3 types of stories are deployable in those contexts for sure.
Oh, I can so see that. I want to, with your willingness, I want to turn a little bit to your personal story. And because I understand that you moved to Mexico partly or maybe mostly to have some me time, to work with yourself, to really that you're not currently in a relationship and that you're being with you. Would you say a bit about that choice?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm pretty similar to you insofar as I'm a New Yorker, born and raised. Grew up in New York, spent a lot of time in New York, and as everything was kicking off in 2020, I'd known for years I didn't want to be in New York. My relationship was getting into an interesting space too, and I just really saw that. Say it this way. The 2020 incident of 2020 really exposed a lot of things I didn't want to deal with and I've been pushing away.
Yeah.
And then because you're literally, your motion is completely stopped. All this stuff is just kind of there. So I use the analogy for anyone who's watched cartoons. If there's like samurai cartoons where the guy hits a sword on like a wall and you see all these flashes of light and then there's a moment and then everything explodes. I was the wall that had all the cuts and scars, and then the lack of motion just caused it all to kind of fizzle and break. And in getting out of a relationship, in my business not doing as well as I wanted, my city dying on the vine, and just kind of not having a lot of options for what to do or where to go or who to talk to or everything else like this, I had a great conversation with a close friend of mine who lived down here in Mexico. And he's like, dude, you don't look like you're doing super well. Like, maybe you want to come down here. We got sunlight. It's open, and I'm here, and you can work on it, and it's cheaper than New York. And so I gave a good think about it. I decided on it, and then I called my parents and I sat down with them. I was like, hey, here's what I'm thinking about doing. I already decided, but I want to get your blessing too. And I decided that I needed to kind of repair myself. My mental health was a priority. It always is, but especially in that time. I was like, I need to start over. I need to just completely wipe the slate clean. And that's what I did. I came down here. I started from nothing, not many relationships, don't know many people, don't know the place. But I think when I run it all back, I was definitely in pain. And I saw that I needed to take some extreme action to get out of that pain. And no one was going to do it for me. So coming back to knowing your story, building rapport, the most important rapport you can build is with yourself.
Amen.
And if you can't check in on yourself and be direct and honest with yourself about, hey, this isn't working, and it's me that's not working, that's probably the best place to start with most things. Because like it or not, when you look at the successes or failures of your life, there's probably one consistent feature, and it's you. And that's never a comfortable chair to sit in, a comfortable pill to swallow, or conversation to have. But if you don't take the initiative and build the rapport with yourself, something's going to force you to build that rapport, and it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be way more difficult than otherwise. And I think just echoing that back to you as well, that's why your work's really important, because you help people understand that about themselves and give themselves a position to be in, and a base and a point of origin to move from. And I think also story can help a lot with that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I understand that you have a free gift for our listeners. That's some speaking resources. Could you let them know about that?
Sure, absolutely. So I have a presentation planning guide. If presentation could be you being on stage, could be you doing a sales call. It also could be you going out on a date.
Yeah.
Right. You can just make notes. It just outlines kind of some key questions you want to ask, some ways you want to research the people you're talking about. Great questions you can just kind of use to get people involved in the story that you're building together. So that'll be available for anybody, 100% free. And if you have questions or comments on it, I'd love to hear them.
Awesome. It's been so great to talk with you. I feel like we could talk for hours. I love this topic. Yeah. Is there any final either quote or idea or story that you would like to leave folks with?
My favorite quote, one of my favorite quotes, is by the original Casanova, Giacomo Casanova of Italy. And he says, "I've always believed that when a man gets it into his head to accomplish something and occupies himself completely in that design, he shall succeed whatever the difficulties." And I love that quote because it's okay to be obsessed. And I think the obsession needs to start with being the best version of yourself. And it's a project that I begrudgingly accepted sometimes, but I'm super happy with the results, and I'm better for it. So I encourage anybody, dig a little deeper into yourself, get great mentors or people you can ask and help you answer those deep, difficult questions, like Maria Elizabeth here, maybe myself. Just enjoy your life. It's not a long one, but it can be sweet and beautiful.
Thank you. Beautifully said. So everyone, until next time, I'm Maria Elizabeth Molly. This is Stephen Steers. This is Relationship Alchemy. And remember, a great relationship starts with you.